Hey, hey, hey. Happy holidays. Come on in. Pull up a chair. The Gaming Gang Dispatch is in the air. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host, here at the Gaming Gang Dispatch, brought to you by, shockingly enough, not only thegaminggang.com, of which I happen to be the founder and editor-in-chief, but also this week, we are sponsored by Polar Vortex 9. And I will talk about our sponsors I should say sponsor, singular, not plural, in just a few moments. But welcome aboard, everybody. Tonight is Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. This is live stream 1134. If you are not overly familiar with the show, let me point out, super casual around here. We just hang out talking about the latest in tabletop gaming news, and then I will normally pontificate about a topic related to our hobby. So all throughout December, I have been actually exploring classic Advanced Dungeons and Dragons adventures, and tonight I am going to wrap up that series as we dive on into the Drow series of adventures. Yes, we're going to talk about D1-3 as well as Q1. So, of course, stay tuned for that after the tabletop gaming news. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit gaminggang.com for all the latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. And of course, because this is a live show, that means there is chat available. It's not on screen. It's one of the ways I keep some of the more unusual commenters at bay. But if you are a subscriber to the channel and have been for at least 10 minutes, you can take part in chat. So if you want to say howdy, maybe get a question, a comment, by all means, chime in. I will do my best to respond. And first out the gate tonight, in fact, up to about a second ago, the only one out the gate tonight is Testy Trekkie. Lewin RX is with us, and I'll take a guess that the lovely and talented Miss Sarah D might be lurking in the shadows. She is one of our chat moderators. So she's keeping the peace, which we really never have a big issue with. And all the years I've been doing this, and it's a lot longer than you might think. I know, it's like, wait, how long have I been doing this? Like 6 years? Something like that? 5, 6 years? I think we've had to boot a couple of people. That's about it. That is about it. Jose Fernandez and John Mascola are also popping on into chat. So welcome, everybody. So let's talk about this week's sponsor, because I'm talking about Polar Vortex 9. That's right. Take a break from the cold this February by gathering with friends and family to enjoy the warmth and fun of playing games together at Polar Vortex 9, Chicagoland's favorite local winter gaming convention. The Polar Vortex team invites you to join them at the Sheridan Lyle Naperville Hotel, February 14th through the 16th, 2025. Polar Vortex grew out of a desire to create a general tabletop gaming convention in the Chicago region that gaming hobbyists and the general public could enjoy. They also want to support local game retailers and publishers, as well as give back to the general community. At this year's convention, you're going to find activities such as Play and Win, D&D Adventures League, Star Wars role-playing game, Pathfinder Society, Starfinder Society, the Catan National Qualifier. There's a Bolt Action Tournament, Star Wars Legion Tournament, Gasland Tournament. There's game demos, board game library. There's a silent auction that benefits the American Cancer Society. There are kids' events and activities at the Family Craft Corner. There are Extra Life Chicago raffles, which benefit the Laurie Children's Hospital of Chicago. Costume contest, paint and take, painting seminars, miniature painting competition. There are vendors, crafters, and artistes, and more. Celebrate Valentine. Celebrate Valentine. It's been a long day. Another one of these days where I came running in to the house and down into the Duct Tape Studios moments before the show is about to begin. So let's try that again. Celebrate Valentine's Day Friday night with a special semi-private event. I don't know what that means. Maybe private, kind of private. Regardless, couples are going to enjoy a variety of two-player games and indulge in a Sunday bar. What, no ice cream for the singles out there? The Polar Vortex team is excited to offer another fun convention experience this year, packed with a range of activities. Now you can score the 3-day weekend badge, which is Friday through Sunday, for $45. I should mention Elliot Miller and myself, and probably my brother Greg and my nephew Cameron will be attending. I know Elliot and I are going to be attending. So if you want to do some gaming with part of the gaming gang, we will be hanging out. And we're actually staying at the Sheraton itself. So there is a group rate. I don't know how many rooms might be left. Hell, it might be sold out already, but it wasn't yesterday when I booked my room. And the special price is $119 a night. So you might want to consider that. Regardless, you can visit polarvortex.games in order to register for the convention. Well, I should say learn more about the convention. You actually would register over at tabletop.events. Yes. Very nice. Looking forward to it, because if you follow the show, you know that Ellie and I aren't going up to GaryCon. We were going to, and then we're not. I'm not going to rehash that story again. It's just kind of silly. Short-sightedness, I guess I will say, on the part of GaryCon. So this was kind of cool to make up for that, for us not going there. We're going to get to hang out in Lisle, which is all of, it's probably about a 50-minute drive for me and about 25 minutes for Elliot. So pretty close. Pretty close. All right, we got a few more people popping on into chat. We've got Cthulhu, Semper Buffo, Kathy Evans, Russell Higgins, and the aforementioned lovely and talented Miss Sarah D, who is elbow deep in glitter again with the Christmas crafting crunch time. All right. So let's jump on into the news, because we're going to have another big show tonight. A really big show, really big. Actually, when I was a little kid, I was in grammar school. I was in grade school, as many folks refer to it. And I think I was in maybe 3rd grade. And it was, one of those like shows that schools put on for every grade. And I was the host, and I was supposed to be Ed Sullivan. So I took like very big shoe, very big, really big shoe. I'm sure I sucked, but it was 3rd grade. All right, so let's dive on into the news, because following a successful crowdfunding run, the Triangle Agency role-playing game is now available in print and PDF from Haunted Table. Here's what I know. Welcome to the first job of the rest of your life. Triangle Agency is a tabletop role-playing game in a present-day setting about wielding enormous reality warping power, navigating bureaucratic red tape, and juggling your everyday responsibilities. Player characters work at the Triangle Agency, an international corporation with influence in every industry. As field agents, players investigate and capture supernatural anomalies that threaten the lives and comfort of normal citizens. Kind of sounds a little bit like laundry, although that's like a government agency in that fictional world. Designed for campaigns of 10 to 30 missions or high energy one shots, the brand new game system creates seamless transitions between chilling horror, wacky comedy, and the emotional truth of trying to survive in a world with no right answers, but plenty of right turns. I just threw that in. Here's some of what to expect in this 300-page fully illustrated game book. Learn about the mysterious Triangle Agency and your role in advancing its mission in the Field Agent Manual, featuring basic game rules, story guidelines, setting details, and important regulatory information for compliance with agency standards and practices. Action and conflict builds naturally with the all-new stability/chaos rule system, where every role creates chaos for anomalies to spend on powerful effects and obstacles. Build your agent character by selecting their arc. Each player selects 3 pieces representing your agent's anomaly, reality, and competency, creating up to 729 starting combinations and a completely personal set of abilities as they grow and change. Receive advice from the agency on how your game master can prepare and run missions using the General Manager's Toolkit, including examples of interesting anomalies and ways to bring your agency branch to life. Finally, as your characters grow in power and prestige, peer beyond the play wall to access hidden powers, items, and hidden details of Triangle Agency's story. Inspired by legacy board games, the Playwalled documents provide countless hours of discovery and surprise, accessible only by playing the game. The 300-page hardcover carries an MSRP of $60. I believe it's a pre-order right now. I think it's arriving in stores. And you can also grab the PDF alone over at Drive-Thru RPG for $30. Very nice. I know this was a pretty popular Kickstarter or backer kit, whichever crowdfunding avenue these folks over at Haunted Table took. But I've been hearing some chirping about this game. Sounds kind of interesting, but like I said, it does sound a bit like The Laundry, which actually has a second edition on the horizon from Cubicle 7 Games. Kind of weird, kind of wild. We shall see. Wallona's Cave and Sean O'Donnell, as well as Vorpal Bite, are popping on into chat. Welcome, everybody. Moving right along. There's a new adventure for the Mothership 1E role-playing game. It is out in print and PDF from 5 Million Words Press and the Lost Bay Studio. Here's the lowdown on When in Rome. Everett's Moon is a shithole where the company sends spacers to die. Captain Archie of the Conrad called you up with a way out. Theft from a decommissioned Electrenzo Resources spaceship near Everett's Rings. Get the tech, upgrade the Conrad, and run for freedom on the outer rim world of Caerwedion. Easy, right? Except Caesar/Augustus is no spaceship. This state-of-the-art research space station has gone cold and errant. What was the company experimenting on? Where did everybody go? Can you make it out alive? What's in this zine? 2 maps of Caesar/Augustus, player-facing and warden-facing, containing 10 sectors with multiple areas to explore. New ship class, the Mining Hauler, with interior map. There are 6 NPCs and their drives to complicate your players' lives, as well as 8 Xenophytes and their life cycles to terrorize player characters. This 20-page A5 size zine with digital assets, so not just the PDF, carries an MSRP of $16. You can get that over at the lostbaystudio.com. Or if you want to just grab the PDF, you can do so for $5 over at Drive-Thru RPG. Gotta say, as soon as I saw Everett's Moon is a shithole, I was like, okay, I'm intrigued. Not too often you see somebody sharing their sell sheet info that throws the term shithole in there. Gotta tip my cap to those folks. Hey, could be kind of cool. Kind of cool. I really like Mothership. I think Mothership is excellent. The only thing I point out, and it seems like every time I mention Mothership, I throw this out. As a game master, you just got to make sure that you understand that when the players fail a roll, it doesn't necessarily always mean they failed what they were trying to do, because it is a percentile-based system and their skills and abilities are not super high. So keep that in mind. Let's see. Vorpal Bite was wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. Tomorrow's going to be kind of a holiday show. In fact, I'm not going to do a news section tomorrow, and we will talk about that. The company does not pay well. Cthulhu says, you know what planet's a shithole? Miller's Planet from Interstellar. You go for hours, your friends stay home for a lifetime. You know, funny enough, I like that film and then I don't like that film, which is weird because I usually like Chris Nolan films a lot. I think it's just kind of odd. I think that's what it is. All righty, on to our next news piece. Now, you may recall yesterday I talked about the Traveler 2024 update bundle over at Bundle of Holding. Well, I mentioned there are 2 bundles going on right now that Mongoose Publishing has teamed up with Bundle of Holding to bring you. And I've got the deets on the Traveler Sectors deal. Attention, Traveler. This new Traveler Sectors bundle presents world and sector construction guides, plus source books about many regions of charted space in the Traveler tabletop science fiction role-playing game. Shouldn't that be Traveler science fiction tabletop role-playing game? I would have thought. I'd have thunk it. It just doesn't roll off the tongue the other way. Published for the 2020 Mongoose Traveler 2nd edition, these supplements provide a gazetteer of the Third Imperium Galactic Empire that can enrich any Traveler campaign. Some of the sectors detailed in this offer have provided adventure backdrops for more than 4 decades, such as the venerable Spinward Marshes, Gateway, and the Solmani Rim. Other regions, such as Core Sector, which is the seat of the Imperium, have received less attention until now. Whether your adventurers are jumping across charted space using the Mongoose Traveler rules, Classic Traveler, or anything in between, these guides keep your travelers busy. For just $17.95, you get all 6 complete Mongoose Traveler 2E supplements and adventures in this offer's core collection, which actually has a retail value of $126 as DRM-free PDFs, including the Sector Construction Guide, World Builder's Handbook, the Third Imperium, which is a guide to the core sector, and 3 core adventures: Invasive Species, Last Call at Iniri's Cantina, and Errant Lightning. And if you pay more than the current threshold price, well, at least earlier today, of $41.62, you'll level up and also get the entire Frontier collection with 7 more supplements worth an additional $242, including Spinward Extents, Behind the Claw, The Deep and the Dark, The Trailing Frontier, Rim Expeditions, and Aliens of Charted Space Volumes 3 and 4. These savings do run through January 13th. 10% of your payment, after gateway fees, of course, will be donated to the Diana Jones Award Emerging Designer Program. Very cool. Very cool. So we talked about this last night. When people say, oh, I wish I could get into Traveler, but God damn, it's expensive. I actually had somebody email me one time, and that's exactly what they said. Traveler sounds really cool, but it's so goddamn expensive. Damn it. Damn it, Jim. So I always tell people, keep those peepers peeled, because there's bundles that pop up from time to time. This is one of those times. So if you already have some of the core releases, probably don't need to go with that update bundle, but plenty of other goodies here. And it's not only sector info. It's not just gazetteers. There are adventures mixed through this as well. So keep that in mind. All righty, let's see. Pete Stracklich is with us. Maddie C is popping on in, says their power is out. They've decided to spend their time in the dark with all of us. Oh, well, I don't know. I hate when power goes out. Knock on wood, I have not had a power outage of more than about 2 hours in years. But there are a few times, and it never failed. It would always be at night. Be like, oh, it's dark outside. Oh, shit, power went out. In fact, I lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico for 3.5 years. And I don't know if it was just the area I lived in or if it was just because the grid was trash. Power outages all the time, at least once a month for multiple hours. I think it's because the grid itself was just trash and a lot of people were without power. So I feel for you, Maddie C. I really, really do. Hey, back in the day, didn't really have cell phones and that. At least with a cell phone, you can kind of entertain yourself. Not back then. Moon Right Along, arriving in print next month from Monte Cook Games, is the Tidal Blades role-playing game. Here's the details on that. Welcome to Naviri, a peaceful paradise full of promise and in dire need of heroes. If it's peaceful, why would you need heroes? It's a gorgeous archipelago in which crocs, turtles, humans, and fish folk trade. Fish folk, not deep ones. Travel and study. World of cooperation, science, delights, and celebration. So right here, I can tell it is not for the old school grognards by any stretch. But like any society, Naviri has its share of dark corners, dark dealings, and dark characters. And far out at sea, the Fold, which for years has kept the great sea monsters at bay, is failing. A new generation of heroes is needed to protect Naviri from these growing threats and whatever else is waiting to break out of the Fold. Explore Naviri. Work with your friends to keep your home safe and thriving. You may find yourselves gathering hard-to-find items, tracking down dangerous thieves, or battling a sea monster so massive and horrifying it has a volcano on its back. All while racing watercrafts across the sparkling sea, befriending local wildlife, and competing in contests of skill and strength, you become one of the greatest heroes defending Naviri against creatures from beyond the Fold. A Tidal Blade. Tidal Blades, the role-playing game, is a complete standalone RPG based on the Cypher system. This stunningly beautiful book includes everything you need to explore an adventure in the world of Naviri. 2 complete adventures are included to launch your campaign. Complete streamlined rules for a fast-paced, story-based tabletop role-playing experience in the beautiful world of Tidal Blades, which I think, if I remember correctly, is a board game, I think. An intuitive, concept driven character generation system with limitless options. Play an inquisitive salamander explorer who sails the howling sea, a sharp eyed, cuddle bearded adept who studies anomalies, a brash turtle fighter who brandishes a shield, I should say, a shell shield. Really? So he's got a shell and then he's got a shield made out of a shell? Kind of a cannibal or something? Hey, there's thousands of other creative character concepts you could choose from. It includes a detailed dive into Naviri and the deep, intricate lore of the Tidal Blade setting. Dozens of creatures and NPCs to encounter and interact with. Hundreds of interesting items, watercrafts, and ciphers. Mysterious devices, often found from beyond the fold, with unique powers. The 416-page Tidal Blades, the role-playing game hardcover, arrives January 15th, does carry an MSRP of $69.99. Or you can grab just the PDF alone over at Drive-Thru RPG for a very enticing price of $19.99. So I have to say that, of course, this is aimed for, probably more family gaming and things like that. My interest is piqued. I know. Like I said, this is not going to appeal to the combat heavy players out there. This sounds kind of cool. It sounds very anime-ish. Although I don't think Tidal Blades is an anime. Like I said, I think it's a board game, if I remember correctly. Mini Chest is with us tonight. Welcome aboard. I think it might be a first-time visit live in chat for Mini Chest. So, because the nickname doesn't necessarily ring a bell, but we know sometimes that's not an indicator that it's the first time visit for somebody. Anyway, welcome. Make yourself right at home. Final news piece, now available in PDF, is Outgunned Action Flicks Volume 2 from Two Little Mice. And I've got the lowdown. Action Flicks Volume 2 is a video store of mini expansions for Outgunned, the cinematic role-playing game. It's a collection of ideas, mechanics, tips, and tools to get straight into the action in ever-changing and surprising context. In this book, you'll find 10 action flicks. There's Star Knights. Grip your star sword, lightsaber, and learn to wield the power, force. There's Old Ones. Put a stop to the ritual before it's too late. We get ready to face the return of the Old Ones. Wild West. Set up your horse and set off on a dangerous journey through the Wild West. There's Dark Light. Pick a side in the eternal battle between angels and demons. There's Mighty Swords. Bring your axe down against the forces of evil that plague a fantasy land. District 77. Grab your coffee and donut, climb into your car, and get to fighting crime for another day. I wonder if that's supposed to be kind of a Judge Dredd sort of thing, or is it supposed to be like a police sort of game? I don't know. Then there's Dino Storm. Prepare yourself for an invasion of huge, hungry dinosaurs. Far scarier than hungry hippos. Furious Wasteland. The world is nearing its end, but you still have a reason to keep fighting. Army of Evil. The dead just won't stay dead. I guess you'll have to drag them back to their grave and maybe, get a little sugar with that too. And then finally, this is the one that I thought was probably the weirdest of the bunch, because the rest are all, I get it. I see where you're going with these. Last one, you're taking a look at an image from it right now, is Quack Tales. Get into action playing the role of a duck or another cartoon animal. In each action flick, you'll find an introduction to the specific subgenre and its core themes, some prompts for your missions, new roles and tropes, new enemies and enemy feats, new dedicated mechanics, a dedicated hero sheet, and a hero ready for action. At the end of the book, you'll also find Insert Coin, an extra module that allows you to climb into a video game by mixing together several flicks. The 208-page PDF is now available over at DriveThruRPG. It's going to normally carry a price of $14, but there's a special right now. You can grab it for $9.80. Gotta say, Free League Publishing is going to be, I don't think they're necessarily publishing. They might just be distributing, because they've done that in the past with some of the Swedish releases that they've done. Or then again, they might just be taking over the publishing of this. But I know there's a deal in place with Two Little Mice. I'm excited because I've got a great relationship with Free League Publishing. So I really want to take a look at Outgunned. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Gleeman RX says they're interested merely because Free League made that deal to be their publisher. Yeah. Mini Chess says it's a new name. It is Dan Wheeler, or Typical DM. Oh, sure. Here I thought, oh, wow, it's somebody new. I'm kidding. Pete Strakolich is curious if it's still 50% off everything at Free League's website. I think that was just the Black Friday deal. I think that was it. Maybe not. Who knows? But they had some rocking stuff. I was like, wow, 50% off everything. And I think they actually had some bigger deals than that on some of their, let's just say maybe not as well selling items. That is it for the news tonight. Of course, I've been talking about DriveThruRPG. Don't forget, the gaming gang, thus the Dispatch, is affiliated with the One Bookshelf sites. So, of course, if you are going to go visit DriveThruRPG or Storyteller's Vault, Dungeon Masters Guild, Wargame Vault, what have you, any of those One Bookshelf sites, please stop by thegaminggang.com first. Click on one of our banner ads. That way, if you happen to make a purchase, I get 5% of that sale. And all those nickels, dimes, and quarters really do add up and help keep thegaminggang.com around. So also want to mention that is our final news portion of the show for 2024. That is our last news portion. Because as I mentioned, if you tuned in a little bit late, there will not be a news section to the stream tomorrow, because we are going to dive on in and do that kind of like surprise unboxing, first look at the Epic Encounters Ruins of Symborum. I think it's a couple of I think it's 2 that they're releasing. So that is, I'll show you the box when we come back from the brief intermission, because I showed it yesterday. Pretty big box. It's got some heft to it as well. So we'll see. We'll find out. But supposedly Steamforged Games, my contact with them said that they had actually sent out some stuff that's for content creators. So we'll see. And she said, yeah, I'd love to see you do a live unboxing. So I was like, okay, all right, okay. Pete Strakolich is like, show us the box. Are you channeling 7 there? What's in the box? I loved that movie up to that point. I mean, I still think it's a great movie, but I was sort of like, oh, come on, man. It's like, Kevin R. Smith says Free League had better bundles than their website sale. Yeah, they did. That I want to say it's on Humble. I don't know if it's still going on. It was still going on this morning, the Humble Bundle, but it's all like their non-licensed IPs. It's all the in-house stuff, which is fantastic anyway. And I want to say the Pathfinder Remaster bundle ends today. It ends tonight, which is also a really smoking bundle. For like $35, you're getting $450 worth of PDFs. Pretty wild. Pretty wild. Yes, Kevin R. Smith mentions that there was actually the Humble Bundle, and then you had the One Ring bundles, weren't they? Wasn't that what was over at Bundle of Holding? Because right now there's like 7 bundles of holding going on. So check them out if you haven't taken a peek. Most of them I've shared news about. So there's that. All righty then. So we are going to be discussing the Drow series of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Adventures tonight. It is going to be our wrap of the AD&D series that I've been sharing all month long, except for Thursdays, where I've been providing the Let's Build a Fantasy Role-Playing Game series, which will continue after the first of the year. So normally I would do that tomorrow, but we're going to do that live unboxing. Then we'll do a little bit of probably an AMA. We'll do the December AMA. So if you got a question you want to throw at me, by all means, you can feel free to. Manny C says their power's back on. Nice. That wasn't so bad. Anyway, so we are going to get into the Drow in just a few moments. But first, I think it's time for a brief intermission. Once we get that popping by. Yeah, see, I forgot to even mention that. Forgot to mention paypal.me/thegaminggang. I'm telling you, it has been a long day. I'm actually pretty beat. So it's like, am I going to be able to make it through this show? I think so. I think I can. All right, on to the brief intermission.
It's intermission time, folks. Time out for a delicious snack in our sparkling refreshment building. Every item a fresh, appetizing taste treat.
He might not know what to do with all the crazy gifts he'll get this Christmas, but he'll sure know what to do with Old Spice cologne or an Old Spice nautical decanter or one of our many Old Spice gift sets. Old Spice. He'll use it, enjoy it, and love you for it.
Come on, everyone, it's time. Hello, I'm Orville Redenbacher. This is my favorite time of the year, when we Redenbachers get together to share the best of the season. Of course, we pop up plenty of my light and fluffy gourmet popping corn and my gourmet microwave popping corn.
Ready?
You'll say they're the season's best, or I'm not.
Redenbacher.
Great grandpa to you. May your holiday be the best there is.
Have some Wilkins coffee, sir?
If that's all you serve, I'll get off at the next town.
Next town's 5 miles, straight down.
The action men from Bonanza, the Cartwrights, the greatest Western toys ever. Little Joe, fastest left-handed draw in the West. Ben, the toughest pioneer who ever rode the plains. And Hoss, always ready for a good fight. You can even get the outlaw, the meanest desperado you ever saw.
Watch out! He's getting away! Hit him, Hoss! Pow! You got him!
And you can get the trailblazing 4-in-1 Bonanza wagon. Each Cartwright comes complete with over a dozen accessories. Each horse has action ooze. You can buy Little Joe's Pinto, Hoss's Stallion, and Ben's big buckskin. The action men from Bonanza will put you right in the Wild West. By American character, the hottest brand around.
There you go. You can go buy theater gift certificates. Actually, I would, as a kid, probably would have preferred getting those as opposed to those lame-ass 50-cent McDonald's coupon things. All right, so the box. Here it is. That is the box. That is a pretty good-sized box. We will be diving on in tomorrow. There we go. So Keith Wu says, what do I want for Christmas? Like Crow T Robot, I want to decide who lives and who dies. Oh, man, I remember just how great MST3K was. It was all my friends, myself, Elliot, my friend Ed, Elliot's son. We were all like, dude, it's MST3K night. And there were a lot of times I'd actually be over like at Elliot's house or before we even started doing that, because those were the, those weren't the Joel years. But in the Joel years, we were some of the people who would exchange VHS tapes of episodes. It was wild. And then I had 2 VCRs, so I would record off the one, and yeah, you know how it works. You know how that worked. And I must have like 20. I know Elliot used to have all the MST3K episodes up to a point burned on CDs. That's how far back that goes. When you could fit 2-hour video on a CD. There you go. Keith Lulu points out, keep circulating the tapes. All right. So before we jump in, I do want to point out, yes, I kind of glossed over the whole paypal.me/the gaming gang, but I do want to mention some of the fine folks who have popped on over there and made not small donations. So, of course, it's our good friend of the show, the Madman, my buddy Scott Weigel from high school, Joshua Edwards, John Webster, and John Large. So thank you to all of you out there who use those banner ads and or visit paypal.me, the gaming gang. And of course, please appease the YouTube algorithm lords. And if you have an opportunity, comment on the videos. Somebody had mentioned that it has to be, I think they said 9 words or more in the comment for YouTube to consider like a real comment. I thought that was kind of interesting. Kind of interesting. All right, so tonight we are going to wrap up my series of exploring classic Advanced Dungeons and Dragons adventures by discussing the D series as well as Q1. I ran these way back in the day when they fairly early on. I want to say I think I ran like G&D, probably 79 sounds about right when I ran it. So something I will point out, before we dive on in, I pronounce the Dark Elves as Drow. I know some folks out there pronounce it Drow. And when people could go to correct them, the response is, well, Frank Mensker or Menzer, Menzer, I always mispronounce his name, said it was either or. You could pronounce it either way. But the weird thing is, that's the only person I've ever heard that was involved with Dungeons and Dragons way back in the day who said that, yeah, you could pronounce it Drow. I don't know. I didn't know. All right. So let's start off. We're going to talk about D1 Into the Depths of the Earth, which we talked about the G series last night. And that leads into the D series. Because in the G series, if you missed it last night, you need a little recap. All these adventures except for Q1 were all tournament adventures. So they were all rounds of tournaments. So the G series were tournaments was a tournament, I should say, at Origins for 1978. And then the D series was the tournament for Gen Con 11 in 1978. So the premise is the characters are in trouble for whatever reason, and they're sent to explore the setting of the Hill Giant Chief because there are these raids going on led by giants and their allies or minions, and causing a lot of death, destruction, property damage. The value of these realms are going down. So the powers that be basically give the characters a choice. Okay, go and find out who's behind this, or off with your heads. So, of course, in the G series, the player characters deal with the Hill Giants and their allies. There's some stone giants with them. They also tackle the frost giants and the fire giants. And then in G3, they find out, well, hey, it's the Drow who are behind this. So the Drow are looking to try to subjugate the surface world. Now, it's not all of them. It's just a faction because, of course, the Drow have all these houses, which is stuff that we didn't know then. Of course, the Drow have been, fleshed out quite a lot since 1978. But you do get a little bit of information about the various different rival families, the rival houses, to give you an idea that the Drow all don't get along, right? That there's a lot of squabbling that goes on. Now, somebody had just mentioned Bob Salvador's. Oh, there you go. Pete Strakulich said Homeland, Exile, and Sojourn are all-time classics. Funny enough, I'm actually listening to the audiobook of Homeland because I was like, yeah, I wouldn't mind listening to some D&D books. And yeah, I know there's like 40 Drist novels out there. But anyway, Gleeman Rex says, pronounce it however you want is not a real answer. Kevin R. Smith says they think it varies by setting. In Greyhawk and presumably Mystara, it's either or. In Forgotten Realms, it's always going to rhyme with cow. Forbo Bite says giants are pretty big for first level characters. Well, they weren't first level. Seeing it was a tournament adventure, you figure, and it's the same with this. We're going to talk about this a little bit as well, that your party is supposed to be around 9 characters, and they should have an average level of 9th level. That was in the G series. And because those were tournament modules, there is no like leveling up in the modules. Obviously, running the adventures, sure, your players are going to level up. Otherwise, they're going to burn your house down as dungeon master. But G1, G2, G3, all the same thing. 9 characters, 9 or 10 characters, average level, 9th level. Something that's very important to keep in mind for this entire series. The whole GDQ is that this is designed for experienced players. That newbies to Dungeons and Dragons, even if you were giving them 14th level characters, are not going to do well. Hey, Stephen from Roll for Combat is popping on in. Good to see you, Stephen. Haven't seen you in a while. Raven is popping on in also. Raven says there's no drow in Mystara, only shadow elves. Aha. All right, so let's talk about D1. Into the Depths, or something along those lines. I think it's Into the Depths of the Earth, if I remember correctly. So this, as I mentioned, was a tournament adventure. This was the first round of the Gen Con 11 Dungeons and Dragons tournament in 1978. D1, D2, and D3 are all written by Gary Gygax. Now, funny enough, this adventure actually clocks in at all of, get ready, 11 pages. Now, of course, it's a little longer than that. I think the module is actually 20 pages total. But the rest of it's just maps, stat blocks. So it does call for about 9 characters. And this time the average level should be 9 or 10. First thing I point out is D1 is certainly not as difficult as the finale to the G series. Hall of the Fire Giant King is pretty tough. It's a pretty rough adventure. And especially if you're, running a game for just a bunch of murder hobos, then yeah, you're gonna have a hard time about it. To be honest, if I were a dungeon master running any adventure for a bunch of murder hobos, I would not be running D&D. Verbal Bite says they set the giant's wooden fort on fire, which you had about an 8% chance of pulling that, of starting a fire, not necessarily burning it all the way down. Because as we talked about it in last night's show, it's the whole area is supposed to be raining all the time. It's really damp and so on and so forth. Anyway, so like I said, I don't really think that this is as difficult an adventure to tackle as Hall of the Fire Giant King. Now, to my knowledge, I think this is the first time that we actually got anything that resembles a wilderness adventure from TSR. And this is really when we start delving a little bit more into the Drow. Now, the Drow were introduced in G3 because the player characters find out that it is a rogue Drow. If I remember right, I think she's a fighter cleric off the top of my head, who is behind the shenanigans. She's the one that's driving the giant raids. So the player characters find a partial map of the underworld. It's not called the Underdark yet. And something that's kind of interesting too is we get information about the Drow. We got a little bit of information about the Drow in G3. But at this point in time, we didn't have a monster manual yet. The monster manual was not out when these modules came out. So your information is still pretty slim. So the dungeon masters were going to have to either hand wave a lot of stuff or they were going to have to make things up themselves. So along that same line, there are a slew of possible random encounters in this adventure. In fact, there are like 3 tables of random encounters. And it's Drow, it's this new race that's introduced, the cone-headed germlane, who actually don't appear in this adventure outside of only a random encounter. Pretty wild. Vorpal Bites going on about kill the monster, count the treasure, collect experience points. The reality is that is not how most old school gamers played. We used to make fun of Monty Hall-ism all the time. Just kick down the door. Hey, what's behind this door? Chris Lundgren's with us. Says, hello from Buddy and his wife, Louisa, are watching tonight. Well, hello. Welcome aboard, everybody. So Vorpal Bites us. And don't play 5e. People can play what they want. It's not that big a deal. Anyway, so one thing that I want to point out is there's so much going on with the random encounters, because this is now an underworld that the player characters are exploring. This isn't a dungeon. And like I said, I think this is the first time that we actually saw TSR release something like this. But with all the random encounters, you're looking at, if you're going to have to create these on the fly, forget it. Because there's just loads and loads of different ones, and it's sort of like, So if you were to run this, you got to make sure that you've got some of these random encounters already created, have them in your back pocket. Personally, what I would probably do is I would just go over the random encounters, pick out ones that I thought would be interesting to run, and then create those. And then when a random encounter pops up, when you roll your die and it's, oh, there you go, random encounter, pick the one you feel is probably the most appropriate, and then just cross it off the list once you're done. So anyway, yeah, so it's kind of funny how these germlane, we get an entry, like a monster manual entry for them, and there's no encounter with them outside of a random encounter. So I thought that's kind of strange. So as I mentioned, the player characters find a partial map of the underworld in G3. So now they're going to continue to try to gather intelligence on those who are behind the raids that are taking place on the surface. Now, right off the bat, as the player characters enter into the underworld, there's a Drow outpost, and there's really, the way it's presented is that the characters can't avoid it. So this is an adventure that, while it's not super sandboxy, there's enough going on that, especially with those random tables, that you can make more of a sandbox feel to the proceedings. So this is an adventure that really does call for players to think outside the box. Because if they just approach this as just kill everything that moves, then if the game is being run by the rules, they're never going to make it out of here. Because one thing that I think is really weird is there's actually no place for the characters to resupply. None. There aren't any shops, nothing. Now, there's some magic items and things like that they can get off of defeated foes, but that's about it. There are some cool set pieces here. We've got some mind flayers. So there's a mind flayer outpost, and the mind flayers are assisted by were rats. And we had the mind flayers in G3 who were just sort of like travelers. They were almost like vacationing. Here, they are at odds with the Drow. And it might not necessarily be really obvious. So, as a dungeon master, what you're going to want to try to do is, if the players decide they're going to take out these mind flayers, which wouldn't necessarily be all that easy, especially if you're using the psionics rules, which I know a lot of people don't. It's fine with me, but still a relatively difficult challenge there with the mind flayers and the were rats. But if the players do defeat the mind flayers, they'll find that many of the Drow will be friendly to them. So this doesn't have to be an adventure where it's like, oh, we're just going to kill everything. We go this part of the underworld. Oh, we encounter this, kill it. So something weird too is there's like hundreds of trolls, troglodytes, and bugbears in this module. There isn't a lot of like dungeon ecology going on here. And it's kind of funny because it is brought up in, I want to say it's this adventure or the next one, that supposedly that, oh, there's an agreement. Oh, actually it is in this one. That there's like an agreement with the Drow and the trolls and troglodytes and the bugbears that, they kind of all assist each other. It's kind of weird. I mean, for one, it's like, what do they all eat? I mean, come on. Are they all eating like glowing lichen? I don't think so. So anyway, so we've got those monsters. We've got giant slugs, gargoyles. There's a lich that the characters might encounter. And at no point, like I said, is there any place for them to resupply. They can't restock supplies or consumables. And like I said, Gary Gygax does mention the dungeon ecology. Just doesn't really hold up to logic, at least in my opinion. What I would do if I were running this, for one, I would trim a lot of stuff out, because the reality is, if we think back, these adventures are written as if the players are getting together for a long time to play, right? Because back in the day, gamers, we usually had that sort of time. At least when I was in high school, college, we had some time on our hands. Not so much nowadays. We've talked about this on other shows where it seems like most of the time, most people, most gamers, I'm going to move that. My mic is right up against the table and it's kind of shaking around. Anyway, most people nowadays have got about 4 hours of game time per session, as opposed to like 8 or more, like when I was younger. So I would certainly look to streamline a lot of this and really just focus on some of the highlights. Because otherwise, you could have a dozen sessions taking place, especially if you end up everything's being combat. So, like I said, I would also make sure to help speed the process along, that I would go through and I would choose some of the more interesting encounters, have everything already pre-rolled up, kind of have an idea of what the situation would be, where the various different foes would be placed and things like that. But yeah, the reality is I would just trim the hell out of this. But something that's actually really cool is that this is the first time we get introduced to this underworld, because prior to D1, all we had were dungeons. We had like cave systems. But there's actually a world below the characters' feet. Their feet? Their feet in Greyhawk. Chris Lundgren says, the Slaver series review was excellent. Already modified the encounters for that series. Got some great insights. I mean, it was fine. I never ran the Slavers, so I really can't talk about it. Pizza Acolyte says, Mind Flayer Outpost, Intellect Devourers? No. Isn't the first appearance of the Intellect Devourers in Expedition to the Barrier Peaks? I think it is. Agile Monk is with us in chat. Welcome aboard. So then we would move to D2, Shrine of the Koatoa. I think that's how it's pronounced. Also, this came out in 1978. This was also a round of the Gen Con 11 D&D tournament. And this adventure actually clocks in just the adventure portion at like 12 and a half pages. So we see the introduction of like another like fish humanoid race, the Koatoa, which seems to me to be Gary Gygax's sort of homage to H.P. Lovecraft's Deep Ones. The Koatoa are essentially cursed, really. They were driven from the surface world. And they worship this, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name, this sea goddess, who is a nude woman with pincers and like a, if I remember correctly, it's a lobster head. But that is their deity that they worship. And this is actually a really good adventure for being, an old AD&D adventure. It's really kind of bizarre. It's kind of weird. It's presented pretty nicely. There are like 3 major encounters that take place. The first one is, and this actually picks up right from D1. So there's what's known as the Troglodyte Warren in D1. It's one of the areas. And then the first encounter in D2 is just north, I think it's northwest of the Troglodyte Warren. And it's where the player characters are going to first encounter the Koatoa. And they find like a riverman who will actually transport them. And it's kind of a situation where, once again, the player characters can't parlay. So I like that. In fact, there's a lot of that can go on in this adventure. This doesn't have to just be a combat slog fest. Agile Monk with a super chat for $49.99. Thank you very much. It says, Merry Christmas. Love and blessings to the entire Gaming Gang family and community. Thank you kindly. Thank you very much, Agile Monk. Chris Lundgren says, Greyhawk is a much more flexible world than Forgotten Realms. It's their preferred world setting. Glad it's back in 5.5. Some people don't like Greyhawk because they find Greyhawk to be just too medieval European in flavor. The reality is, do what you want with it. That's how I look at it. I mean, if you want some areas of Greyhawk to be more Middle Eastern in style and in fashion and architecture and things like that, why not? You do whatever. Flaming Heron is with us. I saw them pop in a little while ago, another of our chat moderators. So welcome aboard. Okay, so anyway, so we've got that encounter, and then the player characters will encounter the deep gnomes. I am not even going to try to pronounce those either, because I always screw it up. It's just, yeah. Sven. Yep. The deep gnomes. And it's another situation where the player characters, it's a patrol that they encounter. And it's a situation where the player characters don't have to necessarily resort to violence. And the deep gnomes actually trade with the Drow. And they hate the Coatoans. And it's kind of funny. So you can use the deep gnomes as allies against the Coatoans. But the funny thing is that even though the Coatoans are evil, they're not necessarily hostile to the player characters. In fact, it's even in the module itself, although it's one of the problems with some of the early, well, a lot of the early AD&D adventures is that as a dungeon master, you really have to study it. Granted, they're like 10 pages, but you really got to dive into it because the player characters can play themselves off as being on their way to this shrine to worship the sea goddess, that they're followers of the sea goddess too. And if that's the case, then the Coatoans have absolutely no issue with them at all. And they won't be hostile unless the player characters, I don't necessarily want to say force their hand, but if the player characters don't behave well, then there will be some fighting going on. So this is actually a module that really does have a lot of opportunity for thinking outside the box, where the player characters can avoid combat, because the reality is that the player characters in Dungeons and Dragons do not necessarily want to just continually be battling with stuff, especially like on a dungeon crawl and things like that, because you have limited resources. Hit points being a resource. And AD&D, you don't have short rests. You don't have long rests. So regaining hit points takes time unless you've got magic. So yes, Chris Lundgren, the deep gnomes are Snurvneblin. Like it said, it's like, and I'm sure I still just mispronounced that. So anyway, so depending on the approach the players take, they could advance the plot line, they could advance the story, they can move along without having to resort to battling it out constantly. Because once again, they're never going to get through this adventure. And as a dungeon master, you are going to get really sick and tired of, oh, yes, another battle with the Coatoans. Okay. Flaming Huron says Jeff mispronouncing fantasy names again. Right, exactly. Like the Drow. It's like, oh my gosh, it's something that doesn't exist. It's not real. It's not hurting anybody's feelings if I happen to mispronounce it. So anyway, so we do have the ability of the player characters to have allies. And I'm always a big fan of faction play because every faction is looking to advance, their agenda, and a lot of times at the expense of another faction. Always dig that. Always like players who focus on trying to set factions against each other, because it's, for one, it can be really entertaining, and two, it's just not the same old combat grind that, and I mean, I get it. There's some people out there that absolutely love that. They'll get together, they'll play Pathfinder for 10 hours, and it's just wave after wave of monsters attacking. There's no story, there's no plot. Hey, if that's what you enjoy, that's what you enjoy. I don't. And I know a good many people who are kind of like me as well. So what you'll eventually do is you move on to D3, which is Vault of the Drow, which is a module which many old school growing yards consider to be an absolute classic. Strangely enough, this does not have a plot. This is really the epitome of an old school sandbox. The outcome of the adventure itself is really completely up to the dungeon master. I think it's pretty wild. This is the underground city, one of the underground cities of the Drow, and we're pretty much introduced to some of the politics, some of the gender politics involved with the Drow, the different families, the different houses, the different pins, depending on what house you're part of. And a great opportunity, once again, for faction play, because the whole premise is that the player characters are trying to find out who do they have to knock off to prevent the surface invasion. And that's why they have traveled to this Vault of the Drow. So this is like really bizarre, because this was actually supposed to be the final round of a tournament. How? Because however that tournament was presented isn't what's in this module. Because like I said, there's like so much leeway in how things can go. And on one hand, I think it is really cool because there is a good amount of information for the dungeon master to kind of create their own story with this city. And then on the other hand, it's sort of like, wow, there's a lot of heavy lifting that has been left to the dungeon master in this. It culminates in the Egg of Lolth, who is, of course, the spider goddess of the Drow. And it's essentially a dungeon. And it's actually a pretty decent dungeon, too. And then there is the Fane of Lolth, which is the finale of this. Now, it's kind of interesting because the Drow, like I said, I think she's a fighter cleric who is behind all this, may have been killed in the G series. So if that's the case, then the dungeon master's got to come up with a new mastermind behind this. But interestingly enough, Lolth has nothing to do with this. She has nothing to do with this, game plan to invade the surface world. She wants nothing to do with it. In fact, she's kind of pissed about it. So essentially what happens is the player characters make it to the Fane of Lolth, and then there's supposed to be a portal into the abyss that the characters can travel into. And the funny thing is, there really isn't much reason that they would do that. As long as they've defeated the mastermind to this plan, then the adventure is essentially over. And that's how you can decide to run this. Because in my opinion, and I know Q1 has been voted like by some folks and years ago as, the number one Dungeons and Dragons adventure ever. It is far from that on my list. I don't like Q1. Well, there's some things that I think are kind of cool. Essentially, the Abyss itself, which is, to my knowledge, I think it's the first time that we get some info about various different planes by way of D&D. And in Q1, suddenly everything changes and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So a little bit of background about Q1. So it's the only adventure in this series that was not a tournament. It's also the only adventure that's not written by Gary Gygax. It's actually written by Dave Sutherland, who was known for a lot of art that he did for Dungeons and Dragons. So I guess Gary Gygax didn't have time to do the adventure. And something else is it was 2 years later that Q1 came out. So Q1 didn't come out until 1980. And this is an adventure, once again, for a large party. And it's recommended levels 10 through 14. So all of a sudden the story changes. That now it's not that important that the player characters have stopped the invasion of the surface world. That now they're going after Lolth, who once again isn't supposed to have anything to do with the invasion, really doesn't want that to take place. And now suddenly the player characters are going to go chase after her, to demand, vengeance, justice, what have you. It's really weird. And then even the Fane of Lolth in Q1 is different than in D3. So there's the ability for the player characters to use this pool to contact the leaders of Jeff, who set them off on this quest in the first place. And then they want them to go after Lolth. It's like, okay, all right. So some of the things I think are kind of interesting is once the player characters go through the portal and they're in the abyss, that they're basically looking at, I'm going to bring up some images. I've been so busy talking. I had all this stuff set up for the different modules, and I'm just, yeah, okay, you're just watching me as I yap. Yay. Anyway, magic and magic items don't all work normally in the Abyss. And I think that's kind of cool. But I also think that it also becomes kind of a pain in the ass for the dungeon master again. So it makes a lot of work for the dungeon master. So that's one of the things I'm not a big fan of. Something else is that you've got this really bizarre setting, and Dave Sutherland does a really nice job of presenting this really weird, bizarre sort of setting. One thing I should mention about D3, one of the more interesting encounters, even though, as I had mentioned, it's really sandboxy, but one of the more interesting encounters in that is when the player characters find this succubus and her vampire drow lover. They could really be some interesting NPCs to utilize throughout D3. And funny enough, they actually do get a decent amount of write-up about them. In fact, more write-up for those two who really don't have anything to do with the main goings on of the campaign. But yeah, kind of cool. Kind of cool that I think a solid dungeon master could really get a lot of mileage out of those two NPCs. Anyway, all right. So here we go. Here's some images from Q1. So anyway, so we've got this really weird, bizarre plane. And like I said, magic doesn't necessarily work the same way it does in Greyhawk. And then suddenly the player characters are just fighting monsters that they fought all throughout this campaign. They're really mundane. I mean, they faced off against hundreds, possibly, of trolls and bugbears. And that's what, that's the sort of creatures that they're going to encounter in the demon web. I thought that's really weird. I thought that was some oddball choices there that we weren't seeing, like some really just out there monsters. It's all just what a lot of people would refer to as book monsters. Like you've got book magic items, just book monsters. So, like I said, I don't know. I mean, it's basically the player characters are chasing Lolth across these different worlds where she's got various different plots in place on each of these worlds, but the worlds themselves only receive a page-ish of information. So there's not really all that much going on there. So, although I will say the player characters get to travel to far more planes than the players in the recent 5e Planescape release did. So there's that. But this is also just more work ahead for the Dungeon Master because there's just not that much detail about each of these worlds. And then, in my opinion, the anti-climax is the big battle. It's a big boss battle with Lolth herself in her Wild Wild West mechanical spider ship. It's like, what? She's got like a spaceship? It's like, what the hell? Which is really another odd choice because the Eberron setting wasn't even a twitch in its daddy's pants in 1980. It's like, where the hell are you coming up with this? I know people were upset about, or they didn't care for Expedition to the Barrier Peaks because it's like, oh, you got science fiction in my fantasy. Oh, you got fantasy in my science fiction. Well, here it's sort of like, wow, what the hell's going on? So I honestly, I wouldn't even run this. I wouldn't. If I were running this as an entire long campaign, I would wrap it up in D3. And I would stick to the storyline that, Lolth is not down with the surface invasion, or maybe the player characters have to make some sort of deal with her to call off the invasion, something like that. As opposed to, oh, okay, now we're going to go chase her down, fight her in her spider ship. The Badger's with us. Said they made a mini campaign that lasts an entire summer with dimensional paintings in Q1. Said the same people came up with that wackadoodle Doom Grinder module that I'm not familiar with. Once we get to a certain point, about 1982-ish, I'm not all that familiar with the old D&D stuff. I mean, although I've heard some really good things about Barry. I've heard some good stuff. Well, I'll tell you what, well, I shouldn't say tried. I started running the Sunless Citadel for my nephew and his girlfriend at the time and another of his friends. And I was just kind of doing like OSC for it. And that was a pretty good adventure. Sadly, didn't complete it because it got to the point it was only going to be my nephew Cameron. So I was like, yeah, we're not gonna do that. I'm not gonna run a D&D adventure for one player. Anyway, but yeah, to be honest, I don't like Q1 at all. I know there's some controversy with the Drow. We talked a little bit about this last night. Even as a kid, I thought it was kind of weird that they're like completely like black skin. And we're not talking like dark brown. Although granted, Q1 does show like a chocolate complexion, but it's supposed to be like black. I always thought that was weird. And yes, I get it. Oh, okay, so they hide in the shadows. Really, there's no exposure to the sun. They should be, as mentioned last night by folks in chat, they should be like albino. Like their hair is white. Their hair is like without pigment. I think it's kind of weird. I think it's kind of bizarre. But the Drow themselves are actually really interesting. And I would say if you're a dungeon master out there and you want to kind of go back and run essentially a really classic campaign, as long as you drop Q1 out of it, there's so much info out there now about the Underdark. There was a lot of info about the Underdark in the mid 80s. So it's not as if you have to turn to like 5e references. There was still a lot of stuff as far as AD&D or second edition Dungeons and Dragons that you can easily utilize. So all in all, I mean, the G&D series really are classics. I think one of the things that's really, really interesting, and it's easy to sit there and be like, okay, so I'm going to nitpick as far as these adventures go. It's important to keep in mind that TSR hadn't published any adventures prior to G1. So it was relatively new to them, even though Judges Guild had some success licensing Dungeons and Dragons to produce adventures for. But I think what really blows my mind is just how much is packed into just a few short pages. If you took a look at, say, like D3, Vault of the Drow, which is real sandboxy, if that was an adventure today, easily 80 pages or more, easily. And of course, there are some drawbacks to that too, where it'd be like, okay, well, I don't necessarily need to know the purpose of this room that hasn't been used in 500 years and it's empty, sort of thing. You know what I'm talking about. Kevin R. Smith says, if there's no light, there are no shadows to hide in. Well, there's supposed to be light in the Underdark. So you've got phosphorus lichen. There are supposed to be like bugs and stuff, like large bugs that also produce like a phosphorus light. And if I remember correctly, isn't there something with like the ceiling of the cavern or whatever you want to consider it to be, that also produces light? And it almost looks like it's a sky above. But yeah, I mean, it's not like, walking around in the sunshine or anything like that. But anyway, all in all, this actually brings back some memories of me running this when I was like 11 years old, which I was kind of surprised that I remembered some of the things that we did. I'll be the first to point out, I don't remember a damn thing. I mean, I remember the premise of D3, and I know I ran it because I know we ended the campaign. I just don't remember anything that happened. It's like, what can I tell you? You know, it's only what 46 years ago, 45 years ago. Sean O'Donnell says, Menzo Berenson, that's even how it's pronounced. I think I'm close. Has a pillar that's heated up to act like a clock for their infravision. Cthulhu says, I remember a 2E game where we went to the Underdark and fought every single member of the arthropod family. Isn't there a second edition adventure that's pretty well remembered? And it's Underdark is in its name. So maybe in the future we'll return to this series. I would have to pick up some print-on-demand modules, though. So we'll think of that sometime in 2025. We might return to this with some adventures that I'm not familiar with at all, that I've never had a chance to take a peek at, and maybe we'll deconstruct them a little later into 2025. So should also mention, if you missed out last night, on Tuesdays in January, I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to be talking about adventures, but we are going to be talking about Call of Cthulhu. So something I've got far, far more experience with. And we're going to talk about some adventures every Tuesday nights. And we're going to call it Cthulhu's Day. Something like that. So that'll be our Tuesday night show for January. And then, of course, on Thursdays, I will continue with our Let's Build a Fantasy Role-Playing Game series and kind of take it from there. And then Wednesdays will just be whatever topic pops up. Because the reality is, it's not easy to come up with topics like, be like, oh, there's 3 shows this week. What am I going to talk about? So doing these little series actually makes life way, way easier. All right. So that is it for this time out. Once again, tomorrow night, there will not be a news portion of the stream. So if you are interested in the unboxing of the Epic Encounters Ruins of Symborum, tune in when the show starts, because that's going to be the first thing that we're going to dive into. So probably about 10 minutes into the show, we'll be doing that. And then we will spend a little bit of time just doing a December AMA. It'll be kind of a holiday show, I guess. All right. So that's it for this time out. If you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell. We'll not only let you know when the Dispatch streams live Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings normally, because tomorrow will be my last show of 2024. But usually the Dispatch streams Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Central. But if you ring that bell, you'll also be notified when I share other videos, such as my upcoming review of the RuneQuest classic, Sun Country, from Chaosium Inc. Yes, this is now being printed by Drive-Thru RPG. And this is back when RuneQuest was with Avalon Hill. And the funny thing is, I've always heard this is like one of the best RuneQuest campaigns ever. And of course, there aren't that huge of changes through the editions of RuneQuest. So you could easily still run Sun Country, even with the latest edition of it. So that is on the horizon. Don't miss out on that. If you were watching live, thank you very much. If you watched live and took part in chats, tip of the cap to you. Because not only do you keep me company, you're keeping each other company while I'm just babbling on about stuff. But of course, I know a lot of folks out there, they don't have an opportunity to watch live, at least. I almost said watch, period. No, they would have an opportunity to watch after the fact. Doesn't matter if you're watching live or on Memorex. Appreciate everybody taking some time out to watch any of the over 2,100 videos here on the channel. Enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time of day it is in your neck of the woods. I will be back tomorrow for a holiday show and that unboxing. And of course, as always, certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.